Hey guys, Negative9 here, how is it going everybody? And in this video I wanted to take some time to talk about the expansion that most of you know is quickly approaching. Right now we're sort of sitting around waiting for the last episode of Living Story Season 3 to come out and the following expansion reveal, so we're essentially sitting in the calm before the storm, so I thought it'd be a good time to talk about some things that I would love to see in the next expansion. There will be some minor spoilers regarding what was leaked, as in the location of the expansion and one of the big new features, but besides that I will try to steer clear of leaks and speak about them as little as humanly possible. That means that I will probably avoid talking about elite specializations entirely though. That being said, let's get into the video. So as many of you know, there were several big leaks a while back confirming that the next Guild Wars 2 expansion will be taking place in parts of the Crystal Desert and Alona. Myself and I'm sure many others are excited at the prospect of finally returning to two of the big locations from the first game, and this represents a huge opportunity for ArenaNet to give us some really great story. Remember, these are places that we have not had a proper look at in over 250 years. Let that sink in for a second. This is a great chance for ArenaNet to give us some amazing lore on what's been happening in the Crystal Desert and Alona while we've been gone. Now I'd imagine the main focus of this expansion would be on Kralkatorrik because of the location, but I really want a lot of good cultural specific lore, meaning a lot of stuff about the Crystal Desert and the people or things that inhabit it, and a lot of stuff on the people of Alona, if there are any left that is, and how they've been faring in the past 2.5 centuries. The last time we heard from Alona was about 50 years ago, when the last of the Alonians fled the reign of the undead lich Palawa Joko. And according to the wiki, all travel between the Crystal Desert / Alona and the rest of Tyria has been cut off due to the presence of Palawa Joko and Kralkatorrik's minions. Now, I do also know that Zaitan's minions were actually at war with Palawa Joko and his undead armies, but I'm not quite sure what happened after Zaitan was defeated, so that's something interesting that I kinda need clarification on, I think. However, the wiki mentions that the Order of Whispers, who are in fact an ancient Alonian order, have an unknown means of traveling between the continents. This brings me on to something else that I would love to see in the next expansion, which is the reintroduction of the three orders as major players in the story. At this point in Guild Wars 2, the order you chose is virtually irrelevant because of the formation of the Pact. Now, in my opinion, the Pact was one of the worst things that happened to the story in Guild Wars 2, but even if we just got one of them involved in the story again, probably the Order of Whispers, considering it's Alona, that would be awesome. Believe it or not, but the orders actually have a fair bit of interesting story behind them, so I think it would be a crime not to use some of the awesome potential that they have. Going one, albeit unrealistic step further, it would be awesome to see unique quests or storylines for each order again. I think it would really add a lot of depth to the game, and I would love to see it make a resurgence. Also, just as a side note before I move on, while I was researching for this video, I found an interesting tidbit on the wiki regarding a character called Alcine. Now, according to the wiki, Alain, or as he calls himself, the Alcine, is a self-proclaimed prophet in the Gladium Canton. Before his imprisonment, he was a soldier of the Ebon Vanguard who was sent along with his patrol behind the Char lines during the Siege of Ebonhawk. He was later caught by them, but all except for him were dead. He now resides in the Black Citadel, and when you talk to him, he mentions a 300-year-old prophecy that states an Alonian long from home, living beneath steel, would rise and lead his people back to the Crystal Desert. Now, these could just be the ravings of a madman, but I think it'd be really interesting to see and hear from this guy again in the next expansion. So I've gone on about the story for a while now, and I think this would be a good time to talk about the zones themselves. In Heart of Thorns, we only received 4 zones, and they were pretty large and they had a lot of verticality, but it really didn't seem like enough. For the upcoming expansion, I'd really like to see more, but I think we're probably only going to get 5 new zones, not including guild halls and raids. But I really think for an expansion, we should probably be getting around 6 or 7. And I'm okay with 5, but only if they're a bit larger than the Heart of Thorns maps, and that's for 2 reasons. First of all, the scaling in Guild Wars 2 has always bothered me. When you compare it to a proper non-instanced MMO like World of Warcraft, it feels so much smaller. And I'm not saying they should get rid of instancing, but I think the maps really need to be a bit bigger to feel like an open world. And secondly, if they're going to go into this expansion with far fewer waypoints and introduce mounts as is expected, then the maps really need to be big. My fear with mounts is that the increased movement speed of the mounts will take the maps and make them feel even smaller than they actually are. Something else that I'd really like to see in the next expansion, however, is a big city or trading hub. If you saw the leaks, it looks like we'll be getting Vabbi in the next expansion, which is great, but I hope they don't portray it as just a crumbling ruins. I know story-wise it's in sort of a dangerous location, but I hope we can still use at least part of it as some sort of city or hub zone for people to hang out. And finally, as far as story and location goes, if we do not get an explanation on what happened to Rytlock in the Mists, we riot. Moving on, I'd like to now talk about some features that I would really like to have implemented, or features that I think the game really needs come the next expansion. There are a lot of smaller ones that I had in mind, like build templates, new PvP maps, new crafting professions, capes, and new racial abilities that aren't completely worthless, but those are all pretty straightforward. One thing that I think the game really needs is a lot more new armor and weapons, and I'm not just talking about ascended or legendary armor or weapons. It could be some exotic stuff or rare stuff, I don't care. Basically anything with new skins. I don't know about you, but I feel like there were hardly any new armor skins added to the game in Heart of Thorns, and I feel like overall Guild Wars 2 has a pathetic amount of armor skins and weapon skins compared to other MMOs. Next, I really wish there was more reason to go and talk to random NPCs. After going back and playing Elder Scrolls Online a couple weeks ago and being reminded of how good traditional questing can be when it's done right, it made me realize how much NPC interaction we miss because of the lack of traditional questing. And I'm not saying we should bring back questing, but it would be really nice to have something that fills that hole of story-based questing. And NPCs are a great way to pass along bits of story. A lot of people complain about the poor delivery of story in Guild Wars 2, and I think this could be helped by giving us some sort of reason to go around talking to people. There are plenty of occasions in the personal story where you have to go around talking to people, so I don't see why it can't happen in the open world. In response to the lack of NPC interaction, I think bringing back traditional dungeons would actually be an awesome way to counteract that. Now let's be honest, the dungeons in Guild Wars 2 are far from the best, but I'd really like to see ArenaNet bring back dungeons, but actually make them difficult. Now obviously fractals have sort of taken over the dungeon role, but I miss being able to physically stand at the entrance of a dungeon, and I don't think 1 or 2 actually difficult dungeons would really hurt fractals that much. And finally, the last thing that I'd like to see in the next expansion is the further solidification of the soft trinity that Guild Wars 2 has developed. The Elite Specialization system has allowed ArenaNet to give each profession a way to focus on support, control, or damage, and as someone who loves playing as a healer in other MMOs, this was a welcome change. I understand why ArenaNet went without the traditional Holy Trinity, but I think they realized no Trinity doesn't work either, so I hope they continue in the same vein they have been. And that's about it for this video. Let me know what you guys want to see in the next expansion in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.